Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Losers Lunch, our weekly exploration in and of excellence. We're gonna have a special guest, Eric Skates, in a bit. What we figured out was when I go through the market, unless I have somebody on who's a market person, they just sort of sit there and stare at the screen, and so might as well focus the camera on El Prez while I go through this. So. Since the last time we've been together, we've had a nice rally. I think tens are, testing what 380 at the moment. We're off our best levels. 380, pretty much right on the nose. We're off our best recent levels. A little mixed. Probably mostly ahead of the Fed minutes, although the next 2 weeks are definitely going to be definitely a pretty data packed. Today, not a heck of a lot of data coming here domestically. Overnight, Germany PPI, for what it's worth, really not great. If you remember a couple of months ago, German inflation really hurt us, but Germany's PPI month over month came in at -4%. The expectation was 0.9, previous 2.3. For those of you that want to know, it measures the month over month change in the price of goods and services in Germany. And boy, 4% drop in price. That's not moderating. That's deflationary. So that was a good number for us overnight. One would think we'd rally a bit more off of that than we have, is what it is. Year over year, to put it into context, 34 versus a forecasted 41. Previous was 46. So you could sort of see, though, that's more abating, but on the month over month, pretty bad number. Chicago Fed National Index was just slightly negative. Put that into perspective. We've had a couple negative reads. But generally speaking, still well off the highs. Last October came in at 0.75. Last November, 4.44. Jan, 0.49. So a negative 0.05, not really a great number. Tomorrow, let's see. We got anything big coming tomorrow? Yeah, tomorrow here domestically, it begins to heat up. Richmond Fed, which is, as you know, I like those Fed data points. On Wednesday, we have some more PMI numbers in France. Germany should have it here in the U.S., although maybe that's Friday. Mortgage apps, building permits, claims will happen. I believe it looks like on Wednesday, whatever that date is, because, of course, Thursday, we're closed for Thanksgiving. Yep, domestically, we have flash PMI. Then Fed minutes on Wednesday afternoon. Thanksgiving on Thursday. Still have data, by the way. We have ECB on Thursday while we're celebrating. And then on Friday, some GDP numbers abroad. Next week's going to be busy. Next week, we're going to have ISM, ADP, jobs. So what's the prognosis? The prognosis is everyone's starting to call a pivot. I said this in one of my market minutes. The range right now is 375 to 425. I lock around 375. I float around 425. Do I think that next week or the week after might be when we break and establish a new range of 325 to 375? Frankly, I think so. Okay. Obviously, that call is data dependent. I think next week's data is going to disappoint. I'm looking at what our forecasts are. They're not that low. So could this be the jobs report to truly disappoint? Look, we've had now 4 or 5 consecutive bad jobs reports. They've all been in the 200 range, but nevertheless, coming out of 4 and 500,000. we're seeing it abate. Could this be the one that turns negative, or maybe, goes below a 100 handle? Possibly. We'll see where the ISMs go. I think they're going to disappoint. Hey, Fredo, how's it going? Choo-choo. And then I'll be interested to see the week after that inflation report. But to me, I think I'm not resolute in this call, but I think that we break through the 370, 375 resistance once we're through this data, because I think the data is going to continue to miss. So that should be your mindset. Data miss, be a little bit more aggressive around 375 on your float lock. Okay. Data hit, you're locking it around 375. At the end of the day, you got these Fed minutes coming. It's hard to think that these Fed minutes on Wednesday are going to be any more hawkish than Powell was. I think you might see some inner turmoil potentially. So what I would say is this. If you're not locked up for November, to me, I don't know why you'd float through the minutes, quite frankly. I would look at beginning of December. Now looking at those December 1st to December 10th lock float considerations, I'm still a bit on the conservative side for those early December closings. I do, choo-choo, Johnny. And happy, even though I said it the other day, happy birthday, 53rd, if I'm not mistaken. What I will say is, if you're willing to take a chance, I float through the minutes. If you're not willing to take the chance, I lock before the minutes. It's just that simple. It depends. And at the end of the day, here's the thing I say: who's not going to refinance in a year anyway? In 8 months anyway? Let's be honest about things. This is where we're headed. Rates will be materially lower in a year. So if you have an opportunity to sort of buy the dip right here, hey buddy, if you have the opportunity to buy the dip here, which is locking, why don't you do it? Because if we back up, you don't have the time. If I'm closing end of December, beginning of January, that's more where I'm on the float boat. So that's kind of where we are. I could tell you what we did with the hedge, and you could bring Eric in. What we did with our hedge was, I had a little bit of a 5 long position. I had some low balance that we were carrying, and we ended up trading about half of that long position. Just in an idea of where you put your money, where your mouth is. You don't have that benefit if you're locking a one-off, if you're the borrower watching this, if you're a realtor trying to advise one realtor, although as a realtor, you shouldn't be talking about rate, leave that to your loan officer. If you can afford to take a chance, maybe you take a chance on this Fed minutes, because I think that on a probability basis, it comes out net more dovish than we might think. But understand that there's risk there. Everybody, welcome Eric Skates, our Chief People Officer. Oh, there's Mark, our Chief Technology Officer, our Chief hey Mark. People Officer at EPM. And so I thought that bringing him on was sort of fitting, because it's Thanksgiving here in America, not everywhere else. We always have to be reminded of that, by the way. And in fact, I think over in the UK, they probably spend Thursday cursing us here in America, because our Thanksgiving was the precursor to our independence. Oh, thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. But, we thought, hey, Thanksgiving is this week. Hey, Jay. Who better to have on than the guy who, look, I know I'm oversimplifying things, but sort of is the chief happy person here, the person who is supposed to think about thankfulness and gratitude and culture and stuff like that, which is sort of what Thanksgiving's about. It's the day that we're thankful for our friends, our family, our health, to whatever extent that might represent on that day. I mean, theoretically, any day above the ground versus below the ground is a day to be thankful for, and stuff like that. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on. I've been watching your show for a good while now, and it's like being on CNN or Fox News, if whoever's favorite is which.
Yeah. We want to play both sides of that. So
trying to be
I did in one of my golf videos. I was like, maybe we could finish this round by the time we finish counting the votes. And then I had to catch myself and say,
watch your audience. Because
not. You know, here's the thing. I do believe that one's religion and one's politics are probably better left unsaid. That's number one. But you know, I'll sort of say this is I'm not a big Twitter person. You know, Eric, as you know, I'm not a huge social media person. I've come around, okay? And so it went from sort of nothing to a lot of LinkedIn to then Instagram and Facebook. My Twitter is just me basically complaining about the Yankees. And that's what I find Twitter to be about in general. It's really a negative form, I hate to say. And I think what Elon is trying to do is turn it into a positive forum. And sort of what the euphemism that Eddie gave this morning on our executive call, and what he talked about was, if you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket when you're crabbing, you don't really have to worry about the crabs getting out, because they tend to pull the one that's closest to getting out back down. And, you know, we talked about in business, who's our crab, and that kind of stuff. Really interesting when you look at it. I've always said it this way: it's easier to pull people down than bring yourself up. That's sort of the crab euphemism. But, you know, I think it's interesting. I believe that what Elon Musk is trying to do is make Twitter better and more ubiquitous for everyone, a true bastion of free speech. And ironically, people are trying to, you know, fault him for doing that, because, you know, maybe some of the speech he's trying to bring back is not your speech. I don't, and I've tweeted a couple of times to Rob Reiner and somebody else, Jersey Jen or whatever her name is. And just like every time, thanks. We try to be open and honest here. Appreciate that, Mike. Every time I go in there, for some reason, they're in my feed. Okay. And it's like, I tweeted to Rob, dude, you have a pretty good life. Like, can you say something positive? It's like, I don't wake up in the morning and say, this is my religion. These are my politics. These are all my problems. Now let me start my day on that basis.
Well, sometimes people have a platform and they feel like they have to spout out the information that they want to get out there in the most quick form that they can to get their word in, because there's, you know, as you go through Twitter, it's, you know, this line of feed that's going all the time. And if you don't see it in that second, it's gone, unless somebody screenshots it and puts it on the news. But it also goes into leadership of, you know, say something if it's worth saying. If you feel like you have, you know, a message to give to your team, then maybe make it a positive one. You know, going over to, you know, what happened today or yesterday, actually, with the news with Bob Iger, you know, taking over for Bob. I called him Bob Paycheck, but Bob Chapek. He, you know, he wasn't the most loved. And so it seems like, you know, that news coming out may be a catalyst of, you know, showing what some true leadership could bring to a company. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, here's two questions. Okay. So I'm going to ask you the first question. I want you to answer the first question second. Okay. But because in the context of the flow of the conversation as it relates to Twitter. But when you're building a culture in an organization, or you're responsible for some of the framing and or direction of messaging, stuff like that, okay, how are you able to let people say what they want to say, but at the same time, police it and shepherd it in a direction that's constructive? So think about that. But as it relates to Iger versus Paycheck, okay, I like that one, by the way. So one of the things that Eric and I have in common is that we're big fans of Disney, okay? And we're big fans of specifically the parks. Certainly, like I'm a huge Peter Pan fan. I don't love all the movies. I love a lot of the older ones, Peter Pan, Pinocchio. So I never really got into like Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. I love the shorts. I love the skiing, the Goofy, the football Goofy and the golf Goofy and the fishing Goofy. Those just are awesome. But how realistic is it? Nice, Jackie. I'll give you
I
tips.
am too. I might see you there.
Yeah, I'll give you tips if you need them. And by the way, I mean, like I've got all these DVC points. If you're watching, hit me up if you're going to Disney, because what I do is I rent my DVC points out, Disney Vacation Club, to strangers. I just assume rent them out to friends and family where you could go.
Hashtag Phil sells DVC.
Yeah, for less money than what you'd rent a hotel room for. Anyway, I digress. So how do you balance? Okay. Well, I don't like you enough, Kev. How do you? I have done it for free. It's truth be told, half the time it's mostly for free. But how do you balance? How does Disney balance in this context, right? Because here's what you and I know is the magic is sort of eroding, if not gone. That's why you call them Bob Paycheck.
Yeah.
Is they it's no to everything. All they care about are the logistics of the park. You gotta, all these reservation systems, ticket prices going through the roof. As an annual pass holder and DVC owner, they've taken away most of our benefits. And I look at what Disney was like even in 06 to 010. Forget about 70s, 80s, and 90s. And frankly, we go in there, and it's not the same. The magic is gone in many cases that they're capable of continuing to create. But they've made a conscious decision to not do it in the name of profit. But then again, that's what we're in business for. So how do you juggle that?
Well, if you really look at it, you think of, it's communication, and it's also user and employee experience. So we want to make sure that we are making sure that they're heard and that they understand that they're not just a number on a spreadsheet, that we're listening to them. And in all fairness, we want to make sure that they're happy. As you said, chief happy officer, but it's impossible to do is make everybody happy, because we all have dynamic personalities and we're all trying to, get through the day, get through the month, get through the year with different roles that we have. So everyone has different needs. And the way I look at it as the company, we got to think EPM first as well. And we have to compromise where we can. And other than that, you have to stand strong with the company and with your coworkers to keep going. And so we listen to the people as open as we can possibly. And then we bring everything to our executive team and we talk through it. They hear everything that they provide us. And with that said, we then take the next steps of what we can do, this month, this quarter, next year. And that doesn't mean that we didn't hear you. It's that maybe not right now for this, maybe down the road, maybe this can't happen, but we have heard you and we appreciate the feedback. So all the communication that comes in from our team, we appreciate, We ask surveys. We continually, send out, tell us what you need. Tell us what you want. How are things going with you? And that communication is always paramount at EPM. So your question of, how do you keep the balance? Every day we are trying to reach out, check in, and find how we can make things better as a team.
Interesting. And I'll say this, and I think that most industries sort of measure what I'm about to say in the form of attachment rate. If I was in a boardroom with both Bobs, right? To me, the balance that I would advocate for to strike is you take folks like us, right? How much more might we spend in the park if we were still happy about the park experience, for example? How more often might we visit? I would suggest that everyone look at their business in that context. If you have happy employees who do a better job, your attachment rate likely would be better. And if you have the controls in place to measure that sort of stuff, you might figure it out. One of the questions I know we ask for, in our MPS stuff is like, do you have a best friend at work? Well, sometimes that's a very unreliable measure. They did free. I'll tell that story.
Different guy.
Yeah. Chris, there's a joke that we have. We'll get to it later, maybe. But all the money that you may or may not spend on recruiting, would you have to recruit if you had a happier workforce? All the money that you spend on marketing and advertising, would you have to spend all that money? Would you have to, I don't know about that, Jenna. Would you have to spend all that money? Would you have to spend all that money? Would you have to spend all that money if, all your customers were as happy as they could be? Is a profit mutually exclusive with the happiness of customers and employees? I think it's an ambitious endeavor. I do. But I think, to your point, Eric, if you're doing it every day and you have the proper controls and analysis in place, you could do it. Look, I could tell you this. We're annual pass holders. I mean, just use me as a case study. I've just generally been so unhappy with the experience in the Magic Kingdom, is that we're annual pass holders for both the Magic Kingdom and for Universal. Okay. I believe that in, we reset in July 20 to July 21. It's 100%, Mark. In July 20, July 21, I think I went to Disney 3 times in the year and went to Universal something like 15 times, something like that. And it's because I think Universal does a better experience at this point. I do.
Well, new stuff is coming out, and the way that you are treated there is a little different now, and you're kind of heard differently too. And to your point with, the magic being gone, well, how many times does a fan have to go online to say, I'm not happy, and they not listen? And the board sits there and, they're making money, but finally they started listening when they stopped making money. And when money started, their stock started going down and other things. So it's kind of like they want both. And so when the fan experience sucked, but then they were making money. But then when the money started going away, they were like, whoa, wait, hold on. Now we got to make a change.
Well, dude, that's what Losers Lunch is about. See, folks, this is the sacrifice that I've been talking about, and whomever might be my guest in this particular case is Eric, from different angles, from market angles, sales angles, ops angles, appraisal and title angles, culture angles, right? Is your success may be short-lived if you're not willing to eat Losers Lunch. Okay, I see the profit because we're cutting corners, but that profit eventually goes away. The market's efficient. It will respond. either be vis-a-vis a new competitor, a competitor who's doing a better job, who's identified, who's willing to deliver better value, or maybe just flat out is cheaper. Because if your product stinks and their product stinks, I might as well spend less money on the shittier product, okay, if they're both going to be shitty. And to Mark's point, and I know that a couple of guys are egging me on for this Dig Up Walt story. I'll tell it, okay? We're going to tell this. We're going to tell the story
for you.
But there's a reason for telling it. So Mark is saying, well, why are all these tables empty, right? If they're trying to maximize profits, because somebody's figured out we've got to pay people too much money in this COVID job market to fill the restaurant with servers.
Why open a new restaurant and not let people get in it?
Right. It just, I would argue, Eric is arguing, we would be arguing that they're making short-sighted decisions in the name of profit, right? When if they would just realize if you build it, they will come. There's people dying to go to Disney. And are just sort of pushing back because it's not the same Disney that we knew. They've spent all these billions and trillions of dollars building goodwill and a brand over multiple generations, and they're forgetting about that in the context of profit. So, look, as someone who's been to Disney dozens and dozens of times, even prior to moving down to Florida, there was this one story that we tell where my older son,
you tell.
Yeah, my older son, Nick, was maybe 5 at the time. And we were here with friends, Scott and Caitlin, before their daughter, Charlie, was born. And so they used to give these tickets for fast passes. Okay. And what I would always do, one of my tricks, to the trade was that at the end of every day, I would go get a fast pass because they weren't time stamped. So we were leaving. We went on our last ride. I'd get a fast pass to stockpile to start the next day. So we'd be able to walk in, get a fast pass for a ride, but have a fast pass stockpiled, and boom, we were off to the races. Okay. So you got to wake up pretty early in the day to
Disclaimer, they do not do this anymore.
They do not do this anymore. But you got to wake up pretty early in the day to get one over on El Pres, okay? So I figured out a way to beat that system. So at the end of every trip, we might have multiple fast passes stockpiled, okay, for the next trip because they weren't date stamped, time stamped. So one day they changed the system. And here we come with a wallet full of fast passes, want to go on Space Mountain. The first guy looks at the fast pass, looks a little bit crazy, like he's smelling fresh cookies or something like that. and let's us go. Yeah. And
PC, not PG. PC.
Yeah. And so the next person up top doesn't want to let us go. And now starts giving me the third degree. Where'd you get this pass? How'd you get it? I'm like, I just got it from somebody. Now, I'm not a liar, so I didn't lie. I just gave vague answers. I maybe just down there. Look, I said, this is your problem. I've got the ticket. The ticket says I could go on the ride. We're going on the ride. And she called up the supervisor. The supervisor comes over, push him back. And that's where the infamous line of Dig Up Walt comes in. Is I looked at him and said, look, I'm going on the ride. There's nothing you could say that's not going to get me on the ride. I have a ticket that says that I'm allowed on the ride. You can call any supervisor you want to call. Call your next in line, call Bob Iger, go dig up Walt. I'm not moving until you let us on the ride. So that's the story, because I can't tell you how many times, and here's why. If it was a real rule, I get it. I respect the rules. Generally speaking, I don't speed because those rules are kind of in place for a reason. It keeps us safe. But Disney tends to make rules because somebody who never experienced the park in some engineering area in California thinks they know better than the workers' boots on the ground. To your point, Eric, ask every day, and the customers, the patrons. And you walk into these restaurants half empty. They tell you that they don't have a reservation when they do. I've pushed back on that many times, and then they finally let you in, and then, nobody's in the restaurant, and they could have let you in the whole time. As a business, don't make up bullshit rules that are piss off your customers. Make up rules that make sense. Make rules that have a purpose. Be communicative about those rules and be consistent about them. And I think the same applies to your employees, right, Eric? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely. Know your audience. Your team is your audience. And so that goes hand in hand with, if you don't know the people who are working at your company and the culture that is within your company, how can you run it effectively? And ask them to do the core values and to stand up for the rules that are set and the policies and procedures that are set for the organization. So if you get to know the people and who they are and what they're there for to do, their skill set, you wouldn't give a ton of people work to do that's not their strengths. You got to know their strengths and focus on that. And so if, for your story of if you're standing in line and you're wanting to go on a ride, those people should know their audience of who is in the line. They pretty much know all the rules. Most of the people who are at Disney know the rules of what's going on, how to get where, how to get in a virtual queue, all that kind of stuff. So they can pretty much school some of the cast members. And so you don't want that to happen if you're on a phone call with an underwriter or a broker and they tell you, oh, well, it should be this way. Well, let's work together to make sure that we're ahead of that and we're exceeding customer expectation because we're educating our team first and we know what our team needs.
You bring up a great point there, Eric, because that wasn't even a direction I was necessarily headed with this. But I want you to think about this, folks. I mean, you're talking about this is Disney, right? I mean, what? One of the dozen most iconic brands in the history of commerce, probably higher ranked than that, to be honest, especially when you consider the acquisition of Lucas and Marvel. I mean, yeah. I mean, what do they represent? 70% of everybody's childhood, for goodness sakes, in some way, shape, or form, whether it be content consumption, ESPN, for goodness sakes, ABC. And if they're getting stuff wrong think about this, and dude, you're 100% spot on. The consistent Disney customers know the ins and outs of the park better than the employees do. Know the rules, know the guidelines, know the parameters. What does that say when a company that big is potentially getting their workforce wrong? Potentially not concerned enough about the level of knowledge that their boots on the ground people have. What is that? What's the messaging to a customer? To me, it says we don't care about you. And how important, if they're getting it wrong, how much more likely is it that we are getting it wrong at our levels? And how does one endeavor to get it right? Now, I still have an outstanding question, but so here, answer these two questions. The one is, how do you give your workforce sort of the freedom of speech, the opportunity in a public forum to collaborate while keeping it constructive, understanding the crab theory? And then two is, how do you foster and engender an environment of excellence, of education, of learning, of proper casting within an organization to not have a situation where your customer knows more about their loan or the house that they're buying or the insurance, because most of the people that are watching this are mortgage, real estate, insurance, could be others, whatever the product is that you're selling, that your customer knows more than you know about it.
Well,
What
I
are
think
some
the
of the
first
things
one,
that you do?
the second question is answered by the first one. It's education and empowerment. You have to be able to feel comfortable enough with your team that they understand what's going on within the organization and what their role is, in each department. And so if they're educated enough and they're empowered enough to go out publicly and speak about rates, or to speak about, what's going on in the workforce in the industry right now, and you've told them you've educated them as much as you can about why we're doing what we're doing in our organization, then we've done our due diligence to let our team speak freely. And so that goes and just handles the second question of, educating your team and giving them the core values and letting them feel comfortable enough in the organization that they're in to be proud of what role that they're in, because you're right there with them. You're not just sitting back and like, go do your job. You're checking in with them on a regular basis. You're having conversations with them of where they are. You're making sure that they feel comfortable in what they're doing. They're happy in what they're doing. And if they're not, they're speaking up. They're encouraged to speak courageously of, I don't know how to do this. Can you walk me through it? Because then they can speak freely to a broker, to a realtor, to a consumer. And we don't have to police Twitter. We don't have to police them on social media, or, if they feel like going on a conversation on a YouTube channel like this, or, on Facebook. So that's my answer for both of those questions.
Gotcha. So as we begin to wind down, can you give us one or two things that you've implemented or are going to implement to help foster, if not a better culture, at a minimum, the move towards that, because it doesn't happen overnight. So I think it's first making the decision that culture is important within your organization. Then second is laying the foundation. Third, implementing some tools. Fourth, sort of actualizing it and managing it. So kind of take us to the beginning of, so let's start here. Why should you care about your culture? Okay. And then two, what are some of the things that you've implemented that can lay the foundation for a better culture?
So you should care about your culture because that's the environment that you are in every day. And, you love being at home with your family and you want to spend time with them. However, you're at work now a lot more than you are with your family nowadays, especially with virtual work. And, that life balance that you create. So you want to be able to create a type of culture that you feel as welcome and culturally aligned with as possible, so that you feel comfortable every day, or even if you get out of your comfort zone, you're learning and you're growing in your career. And so those types of people within that environment are all working together seamlessly. And it's 100 million little things. It's not just one thing that makes up a culture. But in general, if you want to create a positive, nurturing, educational, informative culture, it's casting, it's the type of work you're doing, it's the recognition you give, it's the ability to inform your team, education, what's going on, so that they don't feel out of the loop on a call, during a conversation with a broker or realtor or consumer, or even with a coworker. Because if they sit down and have a conversation with a coworker and they didn't get information from a leader, then they kind of feel out of the loop and they don't feel valued. And so that valued piece is huge in the culture.
So I show up to work. Look, dude, leave me alone. I just care about the paycheck. That's it. Let me show up. I'm going to be miserable all day. I'm leaving at 5. Just make sure the check doesn't bounce.
Well, you may be great at what you do, but you're not right for the culture.
Interesting. So what do you do in that situation?
You have to feel it out. It's case by case scenario. But the worst thing that you can do is keep a employee that is poisoning the well, that is just not going above and beyond to work with a team, to collaborate, to bring new ideas to an organization, because you want these employees to stay long term and grow and foster the core values of EPM. And so if we say, okay, yeah, I just want a paycheck, leave me alone, I'm not taking a call after hours, that's not how it works. You know, we work together as a team to create a organizational environment that creates unified through collaboration.
Can you talk a little bit about, like, we use Clifton Strengths, right? So can you talk about how certain surveys or screenings might be able to help you? Because look, let's just say your best producer is the person I just described, right? Getting rid of that person, very, very difficult. How do you win that person over? How can you use some tools to get them to understand that they might be able to level up and still feel like the only reason I'm here is to make money? And or what can you do to identify why it is that somebody may be shut off to collaboration?
So we use something called a balance sheet where we check in with our team members either weekly or monthly, and we ask them questions about themselves to find out how they are doing mentally, how are they doing physically? Are they drinking water each week? Are they hitting their Clifton Strength values? Are they living the core values that they have of their own? And if you go through those exercises and those during those one-on-one meetings with your team, and you realize that something's amiss, it's up to you as a leader to address it, because somebody could have a family issue going on that is in the end causing them to, maybe they need to pay off a bill and they're, financially struggling. And so they lash out at different coworkers. And that's not a norm for them. They usually are very amiable and, work together on a regular basis, no problem. But this week and this month, they're in a funk. Something's up. So ask questions, dig in, find out what may be going on with that situation and how you can help assuage it. Maybe they need to work from home 3 days a week instead of 2, because they need to help somebody at home get through a tough time temporarily. If you are on their side to help them out, they're more likely to do, what you want to do for them, for the job that they need to do. They need you to dig in and help them a little bit psychologically, not necessarily with their work, but alleviate their stress on a different level.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap up. You got to ask questions, and one of the things that we try to really push is embracing conflict. If having core values as an organization, at first can seem a bit hokey, okay? Can seem a bit, dare I say, disingenuous, right? But one of the things, if you're not with EPM, one of the things that you don't know is a lot of the words that Eric used today are part of our core values, okay? And so once that sort of becomes ingrained, and he said, for example, think EPM first. At the end of the day, it's advice that I would give to those of you who run an organization, whether it be a team, whether it be a department, whether it be a division, whether it be a company. Hell, I understand maybe it be a country. We have presidents and kings and dictators watching the show, possibly. Is always ask the next question. Walt Disney said, "Can we plus it?" We were happy, but no. Can we plus it? Ask the next question. Why is a powerful question. If if you've put entity X first, okay, and let's say in the context of EPM, Eric and I are having a conversation, and I'm unhappy with Eric, or Eric is unhappy with me. Well, first things first. Are we unhappy because we're putting ourselves first, or we're putting EPM first? All right. Well, if I'm pissed off at something that Eric said, awesome. Thanks, Jackie. If I'm pissed off at something that Eric said because it offended me personally, well, then maybe I'm not putting EPM first, as an example. You know, if he said, hey, Phil, you're not doing your job and I want to call you out on that, right? Well, if Eric's intentions are pure and he's not putting Eric first because he's trying to be that crab, okay, then I really can't get upset by that, because if I'm upset by it, it's because I'm putting me ahead of EPM. So if both of us are putting EPM first, and that's sort of our stated endeavor, then we should be able to embrace the conflict that we have with each other. All right? And it's that, you know, Eric, you have somebody on your team that's not doing their job. It's coming across in all of our surveys and in the work product. They've been out for the last 3 weeks on vacation when they didn't have any vacation. You approved it. Okay, well, now I'm all of a sudden assuming the worst. I approved it because Eric's a weak leader. I approved it because Eric, you know, owes that person a favor. First thing is, Eric, why'd you approve it? Why jump to the conclusion? Why make the assumption? I've got a problem that Eric approved days off that he shouldn't have approved. Eric, can you tell me why did you approve it? Well, I know it's outside of our policies and guidelines, but this person delivered 4 projects 3 weeks early. And they've always been an exemplary employee, and they have, you know, this survey says that they always get super fan marks. So I just felt for this one employee, it made sense to go a little above and beyond. The context of that conversation is totally different than me brewing and stewing on why Eric was such a weak leader and let this person take advantage of us. Okay. And again, I was able to have, and not that this wasn't a real conversation. No. we're making this up. But I was comfortable asking the question because I put EPM first, not El Presidente first. And Eric was comfortable answering the conversation because he put EPM first, not Eric Skates first. And we were able to embrace that conflict in a constructive way. And all too often in our businesses, we don't do that. You get to the answers quicker when you're willing to embrace the truth, whatever that means. I mean, there's your truth, my truth, the truth, and the facts. But nonetheless, if we do it in the context of putting your organization first, it's really powerful. It really is. And I got to say, I'm thankful for the culture that we've tried to create and that we're still working on. It's always a work in progress. And our ability to embrace conflict. And I'll leave you with this story. We're in Nashville at the NBA, and I had like a 3-hour lunch with Jay Duran, the culture man. If you don't follow some of his content, I was on his podcast recently for like 2 hours. God bless. Go listen to that. We talk about the markets mostly. Why are we talking about markets on a culture program? But that's Jay's style. He just lets you go, right? Because he wants to learn. He's a very inquisitive person.
You were his guest, and that's what your forte is.
Exactly right. And so had this lunch with Jay, and, you know, we were talking about certain things, and I expressed some frustration over some of the, you know, some of the challenges that I saw within EPM. And his answer kept being, well, did you ask him? Did you ask her? Did you ask him? Did you ask her? And I think I do a pretty good job of asking questions, but in some of those instances, the answer was no. And after having Jay ask me probably about 15 times, did I ask? And maybe a third of those times or half those times, I had some excuse as to why I didn't. The last time, as we were sort of partying, one more thing, he's like, did you ask him? And I looked at Jay and I just said, fuck you, Jay. But ask the question. Don't
Well, it's all
assume.
about communication. And 9 times out of 10, like look at Romeo and Juliet. That movie, I mean, that scenario would never have happened if there was clear communication. There's a total miscommunication of the situation. So if you can get your ideas or someone else's ideas communicated properly, you'll be in a much better spot to have a project completed, to build your culture, or even have a better relationship with your coworkers.
Would you rather be right or would you rather be effective?
Effective every time.
Eric, great job. Really
Thank you
appreciate
for having me.
your insight. All right, here we go. What are you thankful for as we approach Thanksgiving here?
It may seem simple and easy, but absolutely my family and my health, because with COVID being rampant all over the place a few years ago, I can't say that I'm not happy. I mean, I'm very happy that I'm sitting here healthy and able to speak with you today on this show.
Hey, without your family, your friends, and your health, you really have nothing. One last thing on that, because you said, hey, it's simple, but it's not simple. I watched some Patrick Bet-David content this weekend, and he talked about, thank you, Mark, if somebody had you at gunpoint on your knees, execution style, right? All of the things that you think are problems that you have today, would they really be problems? And other than family and health, probably not.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you keep things simple and humble and understand what your why is. We talk about it all the time.
Purpose and perspective. Absolutely.
Mike Cordes, if you're watching, shout out to you, dude. He talked about this. We did a live losers lunch at the LOS event. And he said, you said something to me that I'll take with me forever. He said, if you do business with Phil Mancuso, know two things. One, he cares about his family more than, or the way I said it was, if you do business with me, you can know two things. I care more about my family than I care about yours. But, and here's the but, I will almost always put your family's interests ahead of my own. My family's my why. Your family's your why. They are what govern my actions, my decisions. Not my boss, not my God, not my government, my family. If I want to do the right thing by them and be a role model for my kids, that's what keeps me in check. That's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me working hard. That's what keeps me shooting for the brass ring. And that's what I'm thankful for.
And that's
Happy Thanksgiving, Ed. Again?
Said, and that's what makes Phil Mancuso.
Thank you, buddy. Everybody, happy Thanksgiving. Healthy, happy. Close out the month strong. Close out the year strong. Don't take the last 2 weeks of December off. Do it for you. Do it for your family. Do it for a better life. Choo-choo.
Choo-choo.